The Sacramento's Office of Cannabis Management is under scrutiny tonight. Mayor Darrell Steinberg is calling for an audit of the office and a temporary ban of ownership transfers among the city's dispensaries.
So what's going on here? CBS 13's Steve Large is on the case. He's live at City Hall with these new weed worries, Steve.
Yeah, legalized marijuana is a big money business, and the fact you need permits to operate these pot shops means there's politics involved. Now there's questions about how money and politics are mixing in Sacramento.
The wild frontier of the legalized weed business has Sacramento City Hall leaders suddenly seeking tighter controls over pot shop permits after a high-profile federal indictment of this Ukrainian-born California businessman was filed for violating campaign finance law, seeking to funnel money to Nevada politicians. Andrei Kukushkin's name is on the permit for a Sacramento pot shop, 12-Hour Care THC, on Fruit Ridge Road. And one of his pot shop associates has amassed 8 pot shop permits in Sacramento, nearly 1/3 of all the pot shops in the city. The concentration of cannabis permits by one person is currently allowed under Sacramento law.
Today, I would like to ask our independent city auditor, Jorge Asaguera, to take a deep look at our permitting rules and whether they need to be changed to safeguard against overconcentration of permits.
The city auditor says he will be looking into how one individual got so many pot shop permits.
The city might want to contemplate making some changes to the city ordinances to have some better control over how that plays out going forward.
The Sacramento Bee is reporting the FBI is investigating whether pot businesses paid bribes to Sacramento officials.
Has the FBI called your office to ask about any information?
No.
The attorney for the owner of the 8 pot shop permits issued a statement reading, "As we have always done in the past, we will fully cooperate with the appropriate licensing authorities and provide them with complete and truthful information." Sacramento's first chief of cannabis policy and enforcement, Joe Devlin, was escorted from City Hall in May. The city has not commented on whether he was forced out or he left the position on his own.
Okay, meet Joe Devlin. He was Sacramento's first marijuana policy and enforcement manager. If you're confused as to what that title means, think of him as the first head of cannabis regulations, also in charge of distributing out the different licenses. If we look at the story of Joe Devlin and him launching Sacramento's recreational cannabis market, well, I think there's a lot we can allegedly or potentially learn. In this video, we're going to teach you how to rig a newly emerged legal cannabis market. Make sure to hit the like button, comment down below, and check all the links down in the description. While the FBI has successfully taken down elected politicians in several California cities for questionable business practices, which have included paying as much as $250,000 in cash in brown paper bags to city officials at the state's capital, a report from the Government Accountability Institute found that Sacramento is ground zero for dubious public-private interactions between local and state regulators and the industry. Quote, Sacramento has even attracted national headlines because of its connection to the scheme that violated federal election laws. Now, the main individual in this is Joe Devlin. He's one of the key individuals linked to Sacramento's cannabis licensing scandal. Joe is an experienced political consultant who helped shape the policies and standards of the local and state cannabis markets and eventually became Sacramento's first quote-unquote cannabis czar. Joe Devlin had previously served as a legislative director in the California State Legislature and as a consultant to the Assembly Speaker. When candidate Jay Schreier ran for Sacramento City Council in 2010, he ended up hiring Devlin's private consulting firm, Socialism and Devlin LLC, to run the campaign. Schreier won the election and hired Devlin to be his chief of staff, but Devlin kept his consulting practices on active status. Santolin and Devlin provided consulting services for two important 2016 campaigns, while Devlin served as Schreier's chief of staff. The first of these campaigns was when the former president of the California Senate, Darrell Steinberg, ran for mayor of Sacramento, which he ended up winning. The second was to promote Schreier's Measure Y ballot initiative, which sought a tax increase from 4 to 5% on marijuana cultivation and manufacturing businesses to fund city youth services. Also, if we look at that, that's also just another barrier to entry that they just did with that. But as a result of these campaigns, Devlin's firm was handsomely rewarded. Actually got paid out $50,000 in campaign expenditures from the mayoral candidate Steinberg, who won, and at least $24,000 from Schreier's Measure Y initiative. And so these payments, though, to Devlin's firm and to Devlin himself actually were insanely substantial, especially when we talk about for local elections. So they were afforded by campaign budgets significantly enhanced by donations specifically from local cannabis companies in the cannabis industry. From 2014 to 2019, these companies donated at least $225,000 for local elections, and about 90% of that amount went to campaigns for Steinberg, around over $60,000, and Schreier, which is about over $23,000. And also Schreier's Measure Y cannabis tax initiative, which was over $116,000. Why would a bunch of cannabis companies give about $116,000 to raise taxes on themselves? Well, that's an indicator. These companies with a lot of money understand this is a waiting game, and they want to bleed the little guy out dry. And that's unfortunate. So don't think that the regulations that are so crazy in California are some mistake. No, they are actively companies that want that there because it gets rid of their competition, because they know that they can survive and they have enough cash to get through it. Now, let's get to 2017. So in 2017, following the former state senator Darrell Steinberg's election as Sacramento mayor, Sacramento City Council appointed Joe Devlin as the Cannabis Czar, which is officially, the title is Marijuana Policy and Enforcement Manager, in anticipation of the January 2018 launch of legalized recreational cannabis in California. Quote, the timing of Devlin's appointment raises the question about whether or not he did favors for the cannabis companies that indirectly paid him through their campaign donations, right? Well, we can't know for sure, but it would make sense for Devlin to get appointed to the Cannabis Czar position, specifically put there to be crafting favorable policies and potentially doing outright favoritism to those specific cannabis companies that have been donating to the campaigns of Mayor Darrell Steinberg and the City Councilman Jay Schreier almost 3 years prior, and continuing all the way on to 2019. If we examine the actions taken by Joe Devlin, we see someone who understands the importance of having a tight grip of control over the initial 2 years of the Sacramento cannabis regulations. He was in control for 1 year before the Sacramento recreational market officially opened, and a little over 1 year while the Sacramento market was up and running. But what does this do? Well, the first year is important in this because, well, obviously that's where much of the infrastructural regulations are decided on. But more importantly, this is also when the initial licenses are issued. Now, the importance of the second year, which is when the Sacramento rec market is up and running, is that Joe Devlin was able to control many things. One example is him keeping the number of code officers to 2 people when it should have been 5. And for folks that aren't sure what a code officer does or what it is, well, they keep the cannabis companies in check and up to code. They're the regulators. They're the ones supposed to keep tabs on these cannabis companies from not breaking the law. Watch as a Sacramento City Councilman is perplexed and confused why Joe Devlin still hadn't hired more code officers.
But I still have a question. What has been delaying us to hire 2 additional code officers?
So the code officers, there are currently 6 FTE code officers that are intended to conduct inspections and enforcement of legal and permitted cannabis businesses. 2 of those positions are currently filled. We have 30 existing dispensaries. We have a number of about 40 other either businesses that have been permitted or are those legacy operators for a total of 70. It's really going to be driven by workload. So we anticipate that we're going to be adding that 3rd code officer position this fiscal year, and probably that 4th shortly after that. But as more of these permits come online, those positions will be added. And if there's a need for an actual 5th and 6th code officer, I will be back requesting that we put those positions back. But right now, for at least the next couple of, at least foreseeable future, I think 4 would be sufficient for doing the inspections of.
I agree with that, and again, I support your proposal to readjust the staffing plan, particularly because we get more people in the team. But still, even though we allocated up to 6 code officers, we've been at 2 all this time, and from my understanding, the demand for the code officers is still significant. So why haven't we been able to staff up for those 2 positions that we will have here? I mean, if we have a 5th, even if we readjusted the plan to have 5 officers, then the question still the question I'm still asking is, why haven't we staffed up there? So it makes no sense to even add a 5th if we haven't added the 3rd and the 4th. So what's been the delay in hiring that 3rd and 4th code officer?
Again, it's really predicated on the volume of work of the legal permitted businesses. We're going to be bringing on those 3rd and 4th code officers in the next, a couple of months, at least that 3rd one and the 4th one at some period of time. There really hasn't been a delay other than the volume of work that we are working on. But the need for that 3rd code officer is really starting to come online right now.
Councilman Carr for that question. An equity officer or manager is very important because, as you know, the core policy has certain contracting requirements for some of the larger weed companies to contract from seed to sell, as well as the ancillary types of businesses. There are hiring requirements, and I don't think it's reasonable for the city to expect that those kinds of things are going to be achieved without some focused, specific, and coordinated type of effort. One of the things that we would need an equity manager for is to coordinate activities between, say, the police department and ensure outreach is happening in a way that is supporting enforcement, but supporting enforcement in a way that would have those who've been impacted by the war on drugs and qualify for the core program, have those folks be outreach to build their trust that it is safe and supportive to come out of the shadows. Because if we're just using police to eliminate the competition, then that's not an answer, that's not a solution. And so an equity manager is important for those reasons, and thank you for the question.
And Joe, you don't think you need one?
I think I can always do more with more.
Does that mean you need one or you don't need one?
I think some of the issues that Mr. Ahmed is bringing up are very complicated and are very worthy. I think they're part of a much bigger conversation around enforcement and what does that look like moving forward, really over the next year, and how does enforcement of illegal residential cultivation begin to interact with the community, and what happens when these become more owner-occupied homes. And I think that's some of the things that he touched on. My assumption in this budget request that the bulk of that coordinating work as it related to the core program and its interface with the city would be managed by the core program awardee that has yet to been.
So you're going to have some further discussions with Malachi about this?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, second issue.
Now, another important component to the second year while Joe Devlin was in charge was his ability to maintain specific loopholes for dispensary owners to exploit, or at least the dispensary owners that were aware of this loophole. In November 2020, after this whole thing kind of was exposed and obviously Joe Devlin had quit or was fired or whatever that had happened with him, a city auditor named Jorge Azuguera issued a report on the city's cannabis storefront dispensary permitting process. The report describes how a group of 5 business partners legally consolidated ownership of 9 of the city's 30 cannabis retail dispensaries. So while the audit alleged no wrongdoing by those business partners, it said that the city code allowed a loophole that dispensary owners could exploit to circumvent rules against cannabis permit transfers. So the auditor advised the city council to tighten the code language about ownership and transfers. And these partners, what I know, still have these, hold these cannabis permits. It's also, this is another great example of what happens in politics, what happens in American politics, where wealthy corporations, wealthy individuals will get politicians to leave loopholes in tax codes and other, regulation or other, policy, so that they can then specifically take advantage of it themselves. Right. Now, in 2019, Joe Devlin would be fired, or if you were to ask him, he would say that he resigned. Well, even though Devlin was terminated as Sacramento's cannabis czar, 5 weeks later, Devlin became vice president of new market development at Iconic Farms, which offers handcrafted cannabis brands. It was later uncovered that Devlin had granted a cannabis cultivation license in September of 2017, right when he got that job, the cannabis czar job, to a woman named Kimberly Cargile for one of her other companies, which then she transferred ownership of the permit to a stock corporation that Cargile registered under the fictitious business name ATACHS. Now, Joe Devlin was the signatory authorizing the permit on behalf of the city. By spring of 2019, Iconic Farms, which at this point Devlin is now on the board, actually ends up acquiring ownership of THC Incorporated from Cargile and listed it as an asset on corporate presentation document to the city of Pleasant Hill. Pretty much what happened is Devlin pretty much stashed a license for himself later on when he was going to come out. This seems almost like it was planned that he was only going to do 2 years. And, he was effective. While Joe Devlin only had the head cannabis czar position for a little over 2 years, he was in charge during the most critical time, the very beginning of this whole market creation process. Folks, typically where most of the real fuckery happens is usually in the first 1 to 2 years before a recreational market opens, or the first year of the market actually being open. But collectively, those first 2 to 3 years are always where the big decisions are made and where the vast majority of corruption occurs. Whenever you see limited retail licenses or even limited cultivation licenses, and then there's a lottery or an application scoring process to get one or more of those limited licenses, you can almost guarantee there's going to be some corruption or some type of fuckery about to happen. Limited licenses and a small group of people deciding who gets those limited licenses are usually massive red flags. There are plenty of other red flags that I've become aware of in my studies of the specific topic in terms of cannabis corruption, And if you would like to learn more about those red flags and you want to see me do more videos like this, let me know down below in the comments. Anyways, I'm personally someone that absolutely hates corruption. America has been corrupted by corporations at this point, and the negative consequences that come from that corruption are many. But one of the worst ones is, without a doubt, the proliferation, the rapid crushing, demolishing of small businesses in America. And small businesses are the foundation of a strong middle class. Corporations and wealthy individuals have increasingly started using the government to take out their competition, which usually ends up meaning the little guy or the small business owner. The thing that's funny about that, though, that isn't capitalism. Capitalism means competition. No, this isn't capitalism. This is crony capitalism. Folks, the cannabis industry can be cutthroat, unfair, and downright corrupt. To all my smaller or aspiring cannabis entrepreneurs watching, never give up. Always be educating yourself and find your opening in the cracks when it presents itself, and make the most of your opportunity. If you like this video, please hit the like button, share this, and subscribe. Check out the links down below, follow me on all socials. Anyways, this is LMC, signing out.
Garapetian has reportedly donated approximately $3,000 to Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg, and there were also reported donations to Sacramento City Councilman Jay Chenier, and that's troubling to government watchdog Craig Powell.
We believe it's an inherent conflict of interest for any city office holder or any candidate for city office to be taking any money from any holder of a city license or permit.
Mayor Darrell Steinberg declined an on-camera interview today.